Hello. Today we are talking about if you feel like your vagina is too small to have sex, or if you've ever been diagnosed with the diagnosis of vaginismus. So, we're exploring what it is, what is going on when you have tried to engage in intercourse and you feel like you should be able to, but for some reason the penis won't fit, or even a finger or a tampon doesn't fit. And you don't understand this because you have been either A, looking forward to maybe your wedding night, and then you attempt to go have intercourse, and intercourse doesn't work for you. And so nothing is wrong with you at all, but there is a lot we can do and tips we can give you to help you explore why this isn't happening and what you should do about it. So, we are going to talk about vaginismus. We're going to talk about what happens when the vaginal canal, the vagina itself, is just so small. And so, like I mentioned in the very beginning, this is really common. People experience this oftentimes when they've waited to their wedding night to have intercourse, and so maybe their wedding is their first intimate partner or first sexual experience, and now they are, wanting to engage in this, and they literally can't. Other people that experience the feeling of like nothing is going to fit inside their vagina often are people that have trauma associated with this area, and or maybe they haven't even had trauma associated with this area, but they've just had trauma in their life, or maybe very high stress, and it has resonated as holding their vagina very small. And so, what is going on? Why is this happening? Yes, we typically call this vaginismus. Okay. So, this is a spasm of the pelvic floor itself, of the vagina itself, making the opening of the vagina very, very small. This can also mean extremely painful. Um, when people have painful intercourse, that's called dyspareunia. And so that can be a part of what's happening with vaginismus, but you don't have to have that and have vaginismus. So dyspareunia is just painful intercourse in general. Some people have it with initial penetration. Some people have it with deeper thrusting. Some people have it only in certain positions. But what is different is that the penis can go inside the vagina versus vaginismus. Things are just too small and don't fit inside the vagina. Okay. There's another diagnosis out there called vulvodynia that you might be wondering if you have or not. Vulvodynia is when the vulva itself is uncomfortable. So pretend there's skin around the vulva. So here's vagina, here's anus, here's clitoris, and there is urethra right there. And so the vulva is considered this area. So it includes the labia, it includes the mons pubis. So just this whole area is called the vulva. And if you have discomfort with like wearing pants or underwear, and that just irritates the vulva itself, or you can't wear menstrual pads because it's just irritating or painful, or you can't cross your legs and you just feel like you need your legs open in order to relieve that area of pain, that is called vulvodynia. So those are different diagnoses. They're treated differently. Sometimes they can overlap though with this diagnosis of vaginismus. Okay. And so vaginismus, if we go back to our pelvic model, so this is a pelvis, okay? This is the front of the pelvis. This is the back of the pelvis. Up here would be your low back area. This is considered the sacrum. This is considered the pubic bone or pubic symphysis, right between the two pubic bones. And then right between what would be our legs is the whole perineal area. Okay. So this includes the anus, this includes the vagina, this includes the urethra, and this includes the clitoris. So this whole area is called the perineum. And so, what happens when your vagina is too small to engage in intercourse, or too small to have a pap smear, or too small to fit a tampon inside, is that there is spasm within this muscle. Now, this is called the pelvic floor. And so the entire pelvic floor has three layers. The first layer, which is the sphincter muscles that make up the clitoris, but it goes around and makes up the circle part of the vagina. And then there's a second layer, which is a lot of fascia and some of the sphincters as well. And then there's the third layer, which are the deepest layer of all. And so the penis not being able to go in the vagina, tampon not being able to go in, often is because you have spasm in these muscles. So, how do we help a muscle that is in constant spasm? Well, because the brain controls these muscles, we have to work with the brain, but we also have to work with the muscles and we have to get them communicating. So, if the muscle is in constant spasm, it learns to stay in that spasm. And then eventually, over time, it gets shorter and shorter. So, imagine my bicep here. So, here's my bicep. If I walked around with it fully contracted all the time because it was just spasming in pain, I would lose my ability to straighten my elbow and I would just get stuck in this position. Over time, this is going to cause pain in my elbow. It's going to cause pain in my shoulder. I think even by the end of the day, if I had to hold this all day long, I'd have pain in my shoulder and in my elbow, to be honest with you. And my hand would probably be numb. So the pelvic floor is similar. Even though the pelvic floor isn't crossing as many joints, what happens is if the pelvic floor is contracted all day long or your entire life, then it can cause the muscle becomes dehydrated. The muscle, it loses its ability to stretch. It makes all those openings you saw, like the urethra, the vagina, and the anus, it makes them all very, very small. And so maybe it might be harder to have bowel movements. You might experience more constipation. It might be harder to initiate the stream of urine, or it takes you a really long time to fully empty your bladder because you just have such a small opening. It can also make it really, really hard to engage in intercourse, penetrative intercourse, because the vaginal opening itself is just way too small and doesn't open to allow anything inside of it. And so these are all things that can be helped. And it is a brain muscle connection that has to also be evaluated. So sometimes people do benefit by working with a psychologist if there's past trauma involved, and they might have to do some work that way. But they don't necessarily you don't necessarily have to. You can still make a lot of progress by working with a pelvic expert physical therapist. But if you've tried the pelvic expert physical therapy route and that hasn't worked, maybe it's just because you haven't added in the psychological components. And when I say psychological components, so our body remembers things. So even if we had a trauma experience that didn't involve any of this area, but we just had, maybe we were in a car accident or something happened a long time ago and our body just started to hold and got really tight and was holding these patterns, or maybe you just experienced chronic stress and you're chronically, you know, in a fight or flight mode, meaning that your sympathetic nervous system is always really, really ramped up. What happens with that is that when we're in those fight or flight modes or our sympathetic nervous system is go, 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 our pelvic floor stays really contracted because we are ready to fight and we are ready to fly. So when we are in more of a rest and digest, parasympathetic nervous system state, we are more relaxed and our pelvic floor can then get into a more relaxed place. And so a lot of times with vaginismus itself, we're living in more of this parasympathetic overdrive and we're having difficulty getting into a parasympathetic rest and digest phase. For digestion of food, for having healthy bowel movements, we need to have that rest and digest phase. For good sleep, we need that rest and digest phase. For good just homeostasis, so balance of our bodies, we need that good rest and digest phase. So we want to talk about the importance of that, and a lot of that can be touched on in a physical therapy session, but you might need more processing by an actual certified psychologist. So it is just something to keep in mind. However, there is so much that we can help with, especially, one of the stories that just always gets me is, someone waited till to have intercourse till the night of their marriage. They want to consummate their marriage or think that they need to have intercourse to consummate their marriage. And all of a sudden they can't have intercourse because their vagina is literally too small and they can't fit the penis inside. And they might try and they might try, they might have some bleeding, they might have some really discomfort and kind of grit their teeth through it. But they're like, this is not what I was imagining. And maybe it's like an awful experience if they could have the experience at all, or it doesn't happen and they're really defeated and they think, what is wrong with me? If this is you, I'm sorry. And there's so much we can do to help you and make sure that you can engage with your partner how you want to engage with your partner. And so, a lot of the starting basis for therapy is working on breath to help relax the pelvic floor and to get your brain connected with that area of your body. With vaginismus, there's a lot of dissociation that can happen where, and what I mean by dissociation is we kind of like cut that body part off and we don't think about it. In our society as a whole, the vagina is not like a widely accepted, beautiful part of our body, similar to what our shoulder would be, right? Or our face or our nose, mouth, whatever it is. That area is off limits. We cover that area all the time. We're taught as kids that is private and no one's allowed to touch it, and not even ourselves sometimes. And so we kind of just cut that area off instead of accepting and embracing that area. And so, in order to start making a shift to think, okay, we got to heal this part of our body, we have to embrace this part of our body. And if we're going to embrace this part of our body so that we can engage in intercourse like we want to, then we have to start accepting this part of our body. And so breathing is a great way to start to connect to this part of the body. So a lot of times you might go for a physical therapy appointment to help treat the diagnosis of vaginismus, but it doesn't mean we have to start with the intervention of like just going straight for the vagina to stretch these spasmed muscles. A lot of times there's this whole body approach that has to happen in order for your mind and your body and your brain, all of it, to connect so that they can be on the same page. And when they're on the same page naturally, these spasms will melt away. They might need a little help and guidance to help melt away to bring the vagina to a normal size, but it can absolutely happen. And so, a lot of what you will do with therapy is going to be, connecting to this area of the body, breathing into this area of the body, opening up not just the spasm muscles, but everything around. So a lot of times when these muscles are spasmed for a long period of time, people can have things like low back pain and hip pain. And so, it's not just treating this area, it's really treating the whole entire body and the whole entire pelvic area. And so, with vaginismus, if it is trauma related or this area just feels very off limits to you still and you're not able to grasp that, treating around the external muscles of the hip can have a really important um, effect in healing. So, you don't just have to go straight to the area that feels so off limits. We can go to this hip musculature, which is like our glutes, and everything that attaches to the low back and the pelvis. And that can have a big effect on what's happening inside the pelvis. So, those are some of the approaches that we can take that are not just going straight for the pelvic floor. Now, of course, it is going to be important to stretch these muscles eventually. You might have heard of things on the internet like dilator training. And dilator training can be really, really good. That can help stretch the muscles. And you can buy dilators. They're usually sized from 1 to 8. You want to buy a medical grade silicone. I prefer the intimate rose ones. But not everybody likes the dilator approach, and but some do, and that can work for a lot of folks. And what you do with the dilator is 20 minutes a day to an hour a day. You insert a dilator, you kind of right into the vagina with lubrication, of course, and you just sit there and let it stretch. Then you can start adding movement with the dilators, and then you can move up to bigger sizes as long as you don't have pain and you weren't sore afterwards. That works for some people. For some people, that doesn't work. For some people, because there are so many muscles in here, and if we just insert a dilator, we're not affecting every single muscle. If here's what the vagina is, okay? And so if we just insert one big muscle, we're kind of just getting a global stretch. Well, the pelvic floor, when it's really tight, actually you insert here and then you have to go up and get these muscles, which oftentimes feels like um, if you're trying to have intercourse and you can insert a little bit, but then you're hitting a wall, that might be those third layer muscles are really, really elevated and hard to get to. Um, And that's why your partner can't fully insert. Again, that's still vaginismus, but that just means that the dilators might not be as effective, and you might need more of an approach to go really stretch these individual muscles, and really help improve the length of the muscles. Because when something lives in a spasm for so long, it's really hard to just like unspasm it and think that these muscles are just going to be relaxed. If I mean, usually you have to, work. I would get my arm to this length one day, and then maybe the next therapy session I could get to my arm to this length, and then the next therapy session I could get it to this length, and then the next therapy session I could get it to this length. And sometimes I might go backwards and it might go back to a contraction, and I have to really work on getting it stretched out again. And so the same is true for the vagina. And so we just, with pelvic floor physical therapy and manual therapy, we help open up those hip muscles, open up the pelvic muscles, and open up the actual perineal muscles themselves to help improve the ability to have intercourse and defeat the diagnosis of vaginismus. So, if you're experiencing that your vagina is too small to engage in any of these activities, then I absolutely suggest getting in touch with a pelvic expert PT in your area that can truly take a hands-on approach, respect where you're at in your healing process, because it is extremely mental. And it's also, if you have trauma in these areas of your body, or even just trauma in general from past experiences that don't have to relate to your sexual organs or sexual functions. If you just have trauma, a lot of times it's hard to even let someone start discussing these problems in areas. So that's okay. We want to take you from where you are, and we'll meet you where you are, and treatment can start wherever you're ready for it to start. And that might be a hands-off approach, and that's okay too. And so I hope that you find hope in this video. I hope that you know that even if you're experiencing vaginismus and have been diagnosed with vaginismus, or you haven't been diagnosed and but you know that you fit these descriptions, that there is a lot of hope for you, and you definitely don't have to live like this. So we are excited to help you here at Body Motion PT. Please reach out if you are in the state of Washington for a free consultation, and we'll be happy to help you. Take care, guys.